So Ryan and I are going to talk to you about patches because what's more exciting than getting data in, it's actually fixing it up, right? And so obviously, this is not about patchwork on a carpet or a rug, but it's actually the next thing, which is the technical definition of what a patch is. And so for people who are familiar, the HTTP spec supports patch as a verb. You can actually patch resources using HTTP, and JSON patch specifically is a spec for an RFC and a spec for using the HTTP patch method to specify deltas on JSON documents. So this could be sets, updates, adds, removes, anything you can dream of. They have figured out a way to express it. It's very verbose, but it is a complete spec and it works. Why is this interesting? It's because DataHub's metadata model, quick refresher, includes entities and aspects. And so for example, the data set is an entity and it's got a couple of aspects associated with it, like ownership, which is actually a nested list of owners. And an owner has attributes like a name, an ownership type, and other details. And other aspects like dataset properties exist, which include other attributes like a description or other properties or external URLs or things like that. So hopefully most people here are familiar with DataHub's metadata model. But if you're not, hopefully this gives you a rough flavor of what an entity is and then how an entity is composed of individual aspects. What do we do with it? Well, let's say you want to add an owner to a data set. Now, there are two ways to do this. One is using a direct GraphQL API. And if there is a specific GraphQL API built for adding an owner, you can use it. But if you want to use the lower level metadata service APIs, the REST APIs, typically what you have to do is first get all the owners of the data set and then add the specific owner that you want. So for example, let's say Pam was an owner, a technical owner for a data set D, and we wanted to add Lynn as a business owner for the same data set D. We would first get the owner's information, the owner's aspect for the data set D. It would come back as a JSON list with Pam as an entry inside it. And we would take Lynn, business owner, add it onto the list, and then write it back. So that's kind of how a lot of the existing interactions with DataHub programmatically work when you want to add an owner or add upstream lineage or add, make any mutations on the metadata model. However, there are problems, right? One, obviously, there could be race conditions between the time that you get the ownership information and then you write it back. Maybe someone else got added into the ownership list and now you've got a problem. You added Lynn and then you maybe removed Bob, who got added in the middle of this. Performance obviously is an issue. Imagine you had to update ownership for 1,000 or 1,000,000 data sets and you're doing this read, modify, write. Not great. And finally, the DataHub metadata service has to be up for this whole time. So you have to have a synchronous communication to the metadata service. That's not good. We like to do async communication as much as possible. So patches are a way to actually solve a lot of this stuff. And we put our heads together and said, how can we make this work in a way that's not too custom and not too specific? So we're going from, if people are familiar with the metadata change proposal event, it basically gives you the ability to specify an entity type, the entity earn, the kind of change you're making, which is right now only support for upsert is present, the aspect name, and then the aspect value, which includes the serialized version of the aspect. So we're moving from there to support for patch. And that means you can start adding JSON patches in the value of the aspect itself and specify the change type as being an aspect, as a patch. So the new patch-based protocol will work over files, it'll work over Kafka, and of course, it'll work over the service API, which means in app code, you can talk to the client SDK and say, hey, I just want to add Lynn as a business owner to this data set. The client SDK will do the work to generate the patch under the covers, send it over files, Kafka, as well as the service API. And the nice thing about it on the server side is that the final read, modify, write is happening within a transaction, so you don't have any more race conditions.
All right.
And with that, I'll hand it over to Ryan to actually show that it works.
Yep. Okay. So here I've got a current sample data set. So in here, I've got some owners, I've got some tags, and as the part of the requests I'm going to run, we're going to do some adds and removals on those. So if I take this, I go over to my console. So here you can see I'm hitting the standard REST endpoint and just proposal, and I'm going to add a tag into this data set. So then if I go back in here, I can see that this new tag has been added, and now I can remove it.
I think that was another ad.
Oh, was
of owners.
that was an add owner. Gotcha. Yeah. So, okay, this is adding an owner in, right? Sorry about that. So now you can see that this John Doe is added as an owner over here with technical owner as his type. And now I'll do a remove of that owner. And we'll see that it doesn't actually impact that DataHub owner on there. Right, so that is gone. I'm able to add a tag with keeping this legacy tag. I'm able to add an owner keeping this DataHub owner, and then I'm able to remove that owner. Right.
So what Ryan showed obviously was the serialized form of the patches. Obviously, we don't expect everyone to be handwriting those patches. So what's coming to the SDK on the Python as well as the Java side is improvements to make those patches easier to generate. So you can imagine an API like a patch builder where you give it an entity earn, and then you just get a method called an add owner, and then you give it an emitter and it applies it. And similarly for the Java side. So these things are getting built right now, and they're going to come out very soon. Moving on to the next slide. So that's where the future of patch is going. The server-side release, as Ryan just described, is going to be coming out in this upcoming release. So that's 0844, which is, I think we're going to start cutting it tomorrow. And that'll come with basic client-side bindings for you to generate patches. We'll do richer and more extensible client-side bindings in the next upcoming releases as well. And would love to get feedback on how you think that API should look like. What Ryan demoed includes a little bit of custom code for some of these aspects. And where we want to get to is safe defaults for all aspects, so that as long as you have an aspect, you're able to apply patch to it without having to write any custom code at all. And that's we're targeting end of this quarter to release that. And then finally, we love annotations in our metadata model, and we like to get to model-driven everything. And so where we're targeting that support to show up is you should be able to do the most common customizations that you want on the metadata model in terms of generating these patch APIs and implementations purely using the model. So you should be able to annotate an aspect as supporting patch, supporting certain kinds of capabilities on those patch applications, and we should be able to auto-generate the implementation for you. So I'm really excited because it actually opens up the next set of capabilities in what you can do with the metadata model. We've always gotten a lot of great grades on being metadata model driven, but incremental or delta supports was always something we weren't great at. And I'm really excited about what patch support will bring to all of the abilities for you to send metadata events from pretty much anywhere in your stack.